start the recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special event. We are presenting through Cherry Hill Seminary. It's good to see all of you here. My name is Margot Wolf. I am the Academic Dean of Cherry Hill Seminary. And welcome. This is fantastic to see such a large group with us today. We have a special presentation by Holly and Clive Emor, and they went to Egypt for 2 weeks on a pilgrimage. Have some wonderful insights and pictures and stories to share with you today. We'll have them do their presentation, talk to you, and we'll also have some time for questions near the end. If there's something that pops up, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll find a way if we need to get that question answered for you. I think that is all. Welcome again, and Holly, I'll pass this on to you.
Thank you. And can you set us to whichever speaker view it is? Thank you all for being here. I see all kinds of old friends I hadn't seen in a while. It's nice to have you here. Many of you know I am not a professional Egyptologist, definitely an armchair Egyptologist. I have been practicing my own form of Egyptian spirituality for a long time, and never thought that I would be able to make this trip just for financial reasons. So when the opportunity came, my husband Clyde and I said, you know what, this is one of those times we're not getting any younger. We should do this. So I am not here to give you a tour of ancient Egypt today, but I do have a lot of pictures and a little bit of video to share with you. And then I'll have some personal remarks, and I'll look forward to hearing questions that you may have, which you can put in the chat, and Margot will help us with.
Am I having you? There we go. Okay, I want to put...
You tell me when to proceed, Margot.
There we go. All right, I think we're good.
Okay, so I can start?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, the setting for this as a pilgrimage is that it takes a long time to get there from here. So we were exhausted by the time we arrived and by the time we came back. And I mention that because I think that makes it important to understand the pilgrimage aspect. They wanted $13,000 a seat for first class back when we booked our tickets a year ago. And we just thought, okay, we'll take a sleeping pill, and these are red-eye flights. Well, it actually didn't work out that way, but it was okay, and we got there. The morning that we started our tour, we did arrive a day early and rested, but I wanted you to see a little bit of what it looked like to be in Cairo. I managed to only get this fleeting glimpse of moving cars as we drove through the city in the wee hours, and that was quite an experience. I could say a lot about that. This picture on the right is in the morning, early morning, and there's not much traffic there. There's about 6 lanes there. It's fascinating. On the interstate, you can just pull over. 2 cars will pull over and just stop and get out and talk to each other. Pedestrians will walk across. There's donkeys. The buildings in most places do not look finished because in Cairo, at least, you don't have to start paying property taxes until you finish your building. So most things look kind of raggedy on the outside. This was the hotel we stayed for a few days in Giza, which is near Cairo. And if you look, you can see there's the Great Pyramid of Khufu in the background. But I kind of wanted you to see what it's like. There's lots and lots of things planted. You know, if it's not dusty and dirty, it's usually like a garden, an oasis. Very beautiful, lots of smells and fragrances I wasn't accustomed to. The view to the other side of me that was not in the previous picture is the new Egyptian Museum, which is going up. This is where they will have all the things that they paraded over in those big extravaganzas in the past couple of years. It was not open, by the way. Here we are. Everywhere you go, the guides want to take your picture at strategic locations. So we have some pictures that are decent, some that look kind of silly, because they would grab our camera and say, okay, here, stand here. This is a good view. But this is a good view to see what we saw. This is up close at the Great Pyramid. These steps on the left, this is how you go up there. And for those of you who might be considering a trip, unless you are made of rubber and very agile, I will just warn you, it is not made for disabled access or even precarious older adult access like me. It's very ticklish, and you have to be very careful. Not always anything to hold on to. This is over by the Sphinx. This gives you a good idea of how the Sphinx was actually carved down into the rock plateau and has also been flooded with water a lot of the time, which has caused a fair amount of erosion along with the usual wind and sand. The next day we went down to Saqqara, which is, I believe, a little south of Giza, but still in that Cairo vicinity. By the way, this lady in the blue is our guide in that part of Egypt. Her name was Nana, and we just loved her. She's taken us here to the precinct of the step pyramid of Djoser. This was the last one, I think, before they really got it right, so to speak, with the flat-sided pyramids. But it's a huge area, huge. The pyramid is tremendous, but then there's a wall all around it and some other buildings. Referencing my comments about walking and being precarious, you can see how rocky the ground is here. There are ubiquitous fellows in robes, and that's not really a turban. Somebody asked me about turbans. It's really more of a wound up scarf, which is there to basically shield you from the sun and probably kind of be handy for anything else. This is a serdab. This is King Djoser, a statue of him inside a little building just outside the pyramid. And there are two holes here. It's kind of eerie. You walk up and it looks like two eye holes. And sure enough, that's what it is. In fact, his statue is tilted back a little bit so that he can look up at the imperishable stars for the rest of time. So I've seen pictures of him and knew about this. It was really neat to be able to see it. And there he is. He's been there for thousands of years. I wanted to show you how just desolate it does look when you look out towards the desert. When you look towards the Nile, it's lush and green like an oasis for about a mile to either side of the Nile. This is the plateau around Saqqara, and I asked about all these mounds, and Nana said that they were probably all tombs of officials or court people who had been allowed to be buried in the precinct of the king's pyramid. They'll probably be decades, if not generations, continuing to excavate and explore that. I also have a lot of pictures of odd things, like just this wall. I'm just intrigued by the fact that this has been there for centuries and centuries and centuries, and somebody carved those stones, and I wanted a picture of that wall. There are lots of openings down into the step pyramid, but they were not public. I imagine if we had asked and paid the right money. I think I got the impression you can go almost anywhere you want to in Egypt if you pay the right person enough, but we had our hands full with what we got to see. But there were several of these sorts of entrances down into the bottom of the pyramid. Fortunately, we had a reward each day. When we thought we were about to die, then we would be taken to lunch. And this place really was like an oasis after being in the desert, very close by, that I just showed you. We enjoyed that quite a bit. But the pyramids, everybody asked about the pyramids, and we were really glad to see them. And yes, we did go up in the Great Pyramid, and that was, if you have not been and you're going to go, you should ask me. And Oshi, I see you here. We did it, and it just about killed me, but I did it. You have to climb at a 45-degree angle through a very small opening for about 5.5 stories. So if you're claustrophobic or not strong, it's not the greatest thing to do. Clyde, is this the Great Pyramid we're climbing here? Just chime in if you want to say. But there were big...
Okay, I found my mute button. No, this is not. This is actually coming out of whose tomb is this at Saqqara?
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So at any rate, these are just two of the passageways we went through. There were others that were lower. You literally had to stoop over at about a 45-degree angle to, I'm sorry, 90-degree angle to get in. This is going over to a tomb that's at Saqqara or near Saqqara, that's sometimes referred to as the tomb of the two brothers. I wanted to include it so you could see that this is, nobody knows. There's no way for us to really know for sure. But even the guide said some people believe this may have been a gay couple. They were at least brothers, obviously close friends. The tomb itself, I do have a lot of pictures of it. It's just beautiful, the very best kind of carving. They say you can identify the species by the pictures in there. There are plants and animals and activities all through it. You see they're fighting with hippos, which I think is more of a losing proposition, but there's another picture of them, and they were both buried in there and no other people. So that's a little bit unusual. Here we are going into, I think, the tomb of Teddy. But at any rate, another place where we had to stoop low. Remember that these were built to put a body in and then leave them. No one was expected to ever go back in again. This is inside the tomb of Teddy. These are the pyramid texts. One thing I found startling was to realize that the pictures I've always seen of this made it look like some great spacious gallery. It's not. It's very small. You know, there are about 30 of us in here milling around trying not to bump into each other. But the thing I want to impress on you all today, if you didn't already know this, is that these are the earliest religious texts in the world that we have, which are extant. In other words, even the Vedic texts, which are said to date back to about the same time period, we only have copies. This is the original. They appear first in the Pyramid of Unas, which is nearby, and we did not get to go in there. From that middle of Egypt area of Cairo, Giza, Saqqara, we flew down to Luxor, which was also Thebes, and was called Waset in ancient times. And we got to stay at the fabulous Winter Palace Hotel. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe they pulled this off for us. This is the old historic part. For those who may not have heard of it, everybody who's anybody for the past probably 120, 150 years has stayed here. Agatha Christie wrote Death on the Nile while she was here. We were back in a wing off to the other side that's more modern, but we walked through here and it was like going to a historic house or museum. Excuse me. These were the famed Winter Palace Gardens. This was the view from our balcony. It was just exquisite to be there. This is the view from our balcony. You can see during the time we were there, the moon rose each night right there for us. This is a blurry picture, but it shows you there's a wonderful restaurant literally by the water on the other side of the street from the hotel. We ate there several times. So once we got down there, our first stop was Karnak. Karnak, of course, is this huge, huge temple complex. Many people over hundreds and hundreds of years built things here, from temples to walls to entrance walls we call pylons. Again, I'm not going to try and give you a tour of Karnak. It's difficult to convey the scale without being there. It looks a lot smaller in a picture, but you get in there and it's easy to stumble because you're walking around looking up. I happen to like interesting angles and openings and doorways, so I've shared a few pictures that I really like of those kinds of angles. Here you see one of the only two obelisks that's still left there. And here we're kind of going off screen for a little while. One of our pagan friends has helped organize some mini fundraising for the workers at Karnak, and Mamdu is the guide that he referred us to. This was our guide from Luxor south, and Mamdu took us out through this area into what's not entirely public. And if you see Karnak from, say, Google Satellite Earth, you'll see that most of it is these blocks that are lying around. Sorry, I guess this is out of order. Anyway, you'll always see people working too. And here's the ubiquitous helper standing by in a temple. So here we go. We've got acres and acres and acres. As I said, from the satellite, you can see that probably more of Karnak is still a gigantic puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, waiting to be put together. I took a picture of this because these are bricks, mud bricks, mixed with straw that were made thousands of years ago, and I just think that's so cool. So I wanted a picture to remember. And here we are, literally thousands of pieces, many of which are obviously pieces of something beautiful and important from before. They have them up on these concrete or otherwise some kind of what they call mastabas or benches, and often they are on top of a piece of wood to keep, because there's a very shallow water table all around the Nile. So even in the desert, you're never that far from water, and it leaches up into the stone and monuments as well and causes a lot of damage. It dissolves limestone. This is an example of how they have found some pieces and put them together, and you can see that's a gorgeous sculpture there. And I just liked this tree. It's out there in the middle of everything, surrounded by dust and sun, and they've put benches there, I guess, for people to rest. I'd love to know how old the tree is. This is the tomb worker taking us over to the Temple of Ptah, which is in that outer area. So we had to get permission and pay somebody to take us in there. And the reason we went there primarily is because I am a priestess of devotee of Sekhmet, and her small chapel is back in here. So I did get to see Sekhmet, and see no orbs in the picture, sorry. And everywhere you go, there's work being done. the country of Egypt is one gigantic archaeological site. It's no wonder that there's jostling between the people who live there and the desire to archive and preserve so many things. But if we don't do that, you can see, for example, here's a section of ceiling, a lot of which has fallen through, probably a long time ago from the way it looks. Excuse me. So then we went from there over to Luxor Temple Complex, which is also very large, not quite as big. And it's just right there in the city. It was about 2 blocks from the Winter Palace. When you walk in, one of the first things you pass by on the left here is a mosque. And it's a working, active masjid or mosque right there in Luxor, built on top of a previous Egyptian temple. Further back into the area is a former Roman temple of some kind, which was then appropriated by Christians. And you do find that these places were there for thousands of years, including many centuries after anybody even knew what the old religions were or could read hieroglyphs. And they used them for various things, from reuse as a worship space to stables, hostels. People passing through the desert might spend the night. There's more of this work going on. And they're very proud of the fact that the people who do the restoration, cleaning of things that have color behind them are all women. And they think that that's a good role for the women, and that this is a good use of their patient, more meticulous methods. Anyway, they all let me take their picture. They're taking a break. And where they are able to get, see here, they've only cleaned up near the top of a few of these columns, but the colors begin to be very brilliant. And that's because they were done originally in the ground minerals, not the kind of paints we use now at all, of course. Turquoise, malachite, lapis lazuli, red and yellow ochre, probably a few other things. This is, I believe, Dendera, the Temple of Hathor. And you can see it does look a little dull here, and that's because it needs to be cleaned. And the few sections that have been cleaned are stunning. You may also notice, look at Hathor's face. Well, guess who did that? Clearly, it was somebody came along and did not want those Egyptian goddesses to be visible. More from the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. I believe this is walking up to the Mamisi. Mamisis were small areas that told the birth story or origin story of either the deity to which the temple was dedicated or the ruler who built it, something like that. You can remember Mamisi because it's like mammary. These were crypt openings. I found this interesting. There were little hidden passageways. There were several of these throughout Dendera. I think they keep finding them, where the priest could stash things and either store or hide, I guess, depending on what the circumstances were. There was one, you only got to go in there if you were skinny and did not mind being in that size tunnel. We did go down into one that was in the floor. So this is another morning when we are in Luxor and we're out there at dawn, getting ready to take a water taxi, just how people travel, and hence the importance of the boat motif in much of ancient Egyptian art. This is very typical. We also saw parties on the water sometimes late in the day. Bridesmaids party, tourists having just parties on the boat. Just looked like great fun. Oh yes, I want to share with you a little bit of video. This is actually, in case anybody's very knowledgeable, you may recognize that this is up closer to Giza and Saqqara. But I just wanted you to get a feel for what it was like. See, there's somebody who makes papyrus because there's not a lot of it there anymore. Agriculture is a
Allie, your
showing the
video is
video?
not showing.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Darn. Okay, well, I'm not sure what to do about that, so we'll skip the video.
Do you have the link and you can just switch over and put it in the link in?
They're kind of big to do
Okay,
that with.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is driving into the Valley of the Kings. And, you know, this kind of gives you an idea of why the rulers may have thought this was a good place to stash their bodies for eternity. I probably wouldn't go out here unless I knew that there was something I wanted to see. This is Mamdouh, our guide, and this would be a typical opening of the tomb that they've built so that tourists can get in and out. You can't get in all of them. There's several tombs in a row. This is actually not in the Valley of the Kings per se, but that's kind of typical. You start down and go through a doorway that can be locked at night. You got hundreds or thousands of people there at any given time, and everybody is taking pictures with their cell phone. And this is a lot of the bigger tourist attractions like Valley of the Kings have things like this rest area with benches and tables and snacks that you can buy, water and things you can buy. Another picture they told us to pose for. We weren't all that excited about going into Tut's tomb, but we did it. You know, we were there, so we wanted to be able to say we had. I felt kind of sorry for him. His mummy is kind of pathetic looking, but there he is. And when you hear that his tomb is very small, it really is. I mean, that's it. And that, somebody said, well, maybe it was because he was a small person. No, that's not why. But that's another story for another time. Don't worry about it. This is then we went in a lot of these tombs, and I confess that I have lost track, and we're still trying to reconstruct what some of them are. I believe this is either Ramses V or one of the later Ramses. I'm pretty sure that most of these are one of the Ramesside dynasty. And as you can see, the colors are just stunning. They're just beautiful. Any damage is usually because storms, which they once in a while have washed rubble into there, or just because rubble was put in to fill in the openings to try and evade tomb robbers. And one beautiful thing about ancient Egypt in our time is that all of these are meanings that are encoded in the imagery, whether it's hieroglyphs or pictures. And since we decoded hieroglyphs in, I think around 1820, or maybe a little before that anyway, and there continues to be scholarship about reading glyphs. So all of these have meaning that can easily be read if you have studied it. This is all things having to do with the afterlife journey of the soul. This would be a typical passage inside a tomb. And of course, the duat which is where you go after death, is a watery place. You travel most of it on a boat, so you see a lot of this water on the ceiling with pictures of people going through the Duat. And they also are dug well into the rock there. They go down usually several stories. See, here they are in the boat. This is Ra in the form of Khnum. There's Hathor with her cow ears. Let's see. That's probably Horus. I'd have to look closer and read it. And these are protective snakes. These are souls who are kind of in incubation in the afterlife, waiting for Osiris/Ra to pass through during the night and awaken them to a new life. Those of you who know who Nut is, she's the sky, literally, and she swallows the sun every night in the west and gives birth to it again in the morning. And this is, see, these are her legs. This is two of her. And this orange reddish thing is the sun passing through her body. This was, of course, my favorite, the tomb of Nefertari, who was the favorite wife of Ramses II, is referred to as the Sistine of ancient Egypt. It's really, really gorgeous. And you couldn't go in it for a long time. So I felt really lucky that we were able to. Here are some sacred cows, one sacred bull, and these oars, these 4 oars refer to the 4 directions. And take note of this jed pillar, because we're going to encounter that again in a minute. You'll notice that most of the ceilings have these stars painted on them. Those were the, you wanted to be transformed into an spirit and go be one of the stars in the sky for eternity. There were also little rooms off of the each side of her tomb here, which were blocked off, but everybody else had left this room while I was still in there alone. So the ubiquitous Egyptian fellow with the robe on gestured and pulled me over, not to this one, but another one, and invited me in. So for a tip, I got to go in and see one of those rooms and have my picture made in there. That's my husband, Clyde, who has a relationship with Anpu or Webwawet or Anubis, depending on what you call him. Here we are. Here's Nut again. See, here she is swallowing the sun, and her arms are reaching over. Her hands are touching down just under my head here. My other favorite place, which was not colorful, but this is Deir el Medina, the workers' village. On the other side of those mountains is the Valley of Kings. For about 300 years, I believe it was New Kingdom pharaohs, maybe late Middle Kingdom, but at any rate, they maintained this village out in the middle of the desert. They actually brought water and food and supplies out here, and the workers and their families lived in this little village, and they would go hike over the mountain to go to work and dig those tombs, prepare them, paint them. There were skilled jewelers and craftspeople of all kinds, so they made all the tomb furnishings and jewelry and amulets. And because they were so skilled, they built their own tombs in this same area. This is on the other side of where I was standing in that previous picture. And all of these tombs had a little baby pyramid over the opening at some point. and got taken down one way or another. There you can see some tomb openings. But they're like little jewels. They're just beautiful. They're very small, but you can see they're every bit as beautiful as a pharaoh's tomb. We took a whole day to drive up. We stopped at Dendera, the Temple of Hathor, but our main destination that day was to go to Abydos, which is one of the really old religious centers of ancient Egypt. It was quite a drive up there. And this is the Temple of Seti. And I have had an experience with a place at this temple. And so our group here in Columbia is named Temple Osirian. This is inside the Temple of Seti, which I also found very beautiful. But this is, you have to go outside. This was underground. And over the centuries, people have removed the huge stones that were the ceiling and dug it out. But it does connect. You can go down into it from the temple. We were not allowed to do that. If we had arranged it in advance, it would have been about $500 for each of us, my husband, me, and our guide. But I could see why they might think it could be a little tricky to get around in and maybe a safety issue. But anyway, this was a place of pilgrimage for me. So it was very important to us. We brought back some dirt from there. Here we are back inside the Temple of Seti. Can't do that, so we'll go on. This was our dahabeah, which is a small boat, similar to ones they used before the Cook's steamers from the Thomas Cook Company began to be big in late 19th century. Some of them are smaller and shabbier. Some of them are a little bigger and fancier than this. It really looked like we were on an antique boat, although it was quite nice. There's just this upper deck and one floor underneath. It had, I think it has about 10 rooms. There were only 7 of us passengers on it, and the crew and their kitchen and sort of a parlor saloon are also on that lower floor. But you can see the Nile here. Again, so peaceful, so beautiful. A lot of wildlife. All of us on the boat were avid bird watchers, so we were always trying to identify the birds. That fellow's fishing. This is somebody probably taking his cow and donkey to work in the fields that day. One night, our boat crew set us up to eat dinner out on the side of the river. This is a kind of a grill thing, and we sat on the ground. Can't show you that video, at least not right now, but they came out and played drums and sang and got us up to dance with them, which was kind of great because we were all starting to feel a little puny at this time. It had been about 10 or 12 days, and all of us had traveler's tummy that night. But the food was fabulous. Feral cats everywhere. And the Egyptians love their animals, generally speaking. Our one native person who was at the table with us, a young man, he would periodically pull off a piece of his chicken or lamb and toss it to the feral cats that were around us. I was also kind of charmed by the birds everywhere nesting in the temples. They have a bat problem too, and pigeons. So they've tried building bat boxes outside some of the temples. That has not completely worked. This is a bird I've heard about and seen pictures of, and since I love birds, I was delighted to see several of these in our garden at the hotel. And here's one here at this temple. It's called a hoopoe. The Egyptians in modern times have really embraced their history. They are a conservative Muslim country. There are some Christians, the Copts. They don't really acknowledge the presence of any Jews, although I know there must be some people there. They're very aware that a lot of people they think of as New Agers come over there. They knew I was, some of them knew I was kind of vaguely in that category. They don't like you to do rituals or be really overt when you're visiting a temple. However, they have incorporated the symbolism, the imagery from ancient Egypt in a lot of things. I thought of this as being sort of like being in America and seeing logos with the Liberty Bell or Ben Franklin or that sort of thing. This was not our travel company, by the way. I'm more than happy to share. We were thrilled with our company. They were fabulous and customized for us, gave us a personal tour, and were cheaper than everybody else. But anyway, you can see how this is a jed pillar, which often represents Osiris. It has to do with strength and stability, like a spine. Here's Horus as the logo for Egypt Air. And I think most of you here probably have heard of Horus. He's everywhere. I found this interesting down in Aswan. The logo for the airport now has this hieroglyph, and I can only get this quick picture of a car passing by. These were airport cars. The ancient glyph for gold is incorporated into this logo for the airport, which says Nubia. I guess it's a blend of, oh, that's right. Well, no, I can't remember, but at any rate, they work it in there with the Arabic somehow. And of course, Nubia was the land of gold. Maybe it still is, I really don't know. And that was the source of a great deal of Egypt's wealth in ancient times. I was also very taken with the children. We loved the children. They all wanted to be seen with us. They all wanted to high five and shake our hands and get their picture made with a cell phone if they had one. In fact, this was a whole classroom of children that were just walking away when we finally got our cameras out. This was in another temple where I think one of these adults ran up to me and said, "Before you go, do you mind, could I get your picture with my son?" And then they all jumped in for the picture. So for some reason, they felt that was important. And I think of this as the future of Egypt. And I was grateful for the opportunity to for them to be around some Americans and see that we're not all rich, snobby, rude Americans like the stereotype. So let me see if I can, screen sharing is stopped. Okay, let me see if I can share a little bit of these videos because I think that you'll appreciate them. This may take me a minute. First is the drive along the Nile. Is this showing? Can you see the video? Margot or Glenn?
No, we don't see the video. We see the file.
Yeah. You might try sharing your window instead of sharing screen if you have that option.
Yeah.
That'll show what's active on your screen as you move around.
And if not, we'll go on. I don't want to make you watch me struggle with tech. Whoops.
Try double clicking on that drive along Nile and see what happens.
Well, I did. That's what I had done.
Okay.
Oh, I see one thing I need to do. Okay. Sharing again. Okay, do you see the window with files?
Yes.
Okay. Is it showing a video now?
It shows a highlighted video, but it's not coming up.
See it now? No.
Is it
Okay, well, we won't see that part. Maybe I'll post those online. So I'd like to share a little bit more. I have not given this presentation before, so forgive me if I repeat myself or rattle on a little bit. I wrote a journal entry for myself. I had not intended to share this with anybody, but I think it's a good comment on my experience. So I'm going to read this to you, and then I have a few points to make about thematic practice. I sit now in the sunroom watching the remaining autumn colors in the woods outside turn up their orange, yellow, and red as the sun rises. The yard is strewn with dry leaves since we left. Parsley I'd cut back has grown in with deep emerald clumps. The early iris in front will apparently bloom by next week. That didn't last long when the winter weather came. All is still quiet and calm, a contrast to the chaos of 48 hours of travel to return home. A contrast, too, with the constant living of Egypt, calls of the mujahideen at all hours, traffic and the little beeps by which drivers alert that they are about to squeeze past you on the road. The donkeys, women in the vegetable markets, children running with each other or to school, more donkeys, always clopping on the streets, and even when in the desert there is the breeze or even wind, occasionally pierced by the call of a hawk overhead. So utterly different it is here that I can hardly describe it to Mamdouh, who has never been to America and looked blank when I tried to explain woodlands and fields. In the same way, I will be challenged to share with friends the feeling of living for 2 weeks in a desert, moving back and forth from the lush strip of land adjacent the river to the deserts, both eastern and western. I now have a new understanding of what so many of our armed forces have experienced. What can prepare a girl or boy from Arkansas or Wisconsin for a tent in the desert of the Middle East? Excuse me. And what can prepare you for the kindness of the people? The apparent chasm between the rich and the poor, which is mostly everyone, the acceptance of the need to make tourists happy in order to survive. Children and families everywhere, and all seem loved. Adults and older children seem to have endless patience with and time for the little ones and babies. If only we in the US valued our next generations so. I have spent somewhere between 30 and 40 hours on packed planes with whole families, despite anxious, tired, often crying babies and young ones hyped up by getting to stay up late to play with a video device. I never heard an adult snap at a child or sound angry or impatient. Those memories fill me with love for my new alternate country, the one to which I belong and don't belong, in which I will forevermore roam in my mind, but to which I'm unlikely ever to return. Jeffrey wrote me while we were there to remind me to connect with my Neteru, my deities, while there, while there, in such a way that I would bring them with me when I returned home and make them a living part of this land. I felt that occur most assuredly when we hit the runway at JFK in New York. The semi-image, which we saw over and over everywhere we went, suddenly seemed to be framing us in its chords, pulling the lines taut to connect my two lands, Egypt and America. Now we are united, as Upper and Lower Egypt were bound together. I hope always to remember that tangible feeling of the cords sliding along to moor us together. So many years of bashful awkwardness around whether I'm serving gods of the correct place or whether the Neteru want me, etc., have fallen away to the truth of this union. Now I see Hathor outside in the maples and oaks, Ra Harakti in the growing light of morning. As we drove home from the Charlotte airport Thursday night, I could see out the window the bright stars of Sahu, better than we could see them in Egypt, and that would be Orion, by the way, and feel that overarching embrace of Nut, who, after all, wraps herself around the entire earth, wherever we are. So a few talking points to finish this up on religion in ancient Egypt. Both Clyde and I found that we were in love with Egypt from the time we arrived. We clearly had found our other home and belonged there. We did not expect that. The Red Cross sent me to Las Vegas a few years ago after the terrible shooting there as a chaplain, and I hated it. Egypt, I loved. I didn't have to live in the desert, of course, but as a tourist, I was treated as a respected guest. When someone understood that I had more than a tourist interest in a deity or sacred place, it was politely tolerated, but not inquired about. With the exception of Nana, with whom I had a lovely conversation one day about my interfaith interest and activity, and which made her more curious about our Kemetic religion. I found common ground with Mamdouh based on our mutual passion for the history and heritage of Egypt. I learned how to greet somebody in Arabic before I left. I already sort of knew, but I finally got it down pat. Wassalam alaikum, or just salam, peace. So although we didn't go to a mosque, we were supposed to, but we didn't get to. I had a head covering with me. I knew to remove my shoes. I wore modest attire the whole time I was there. Did I have to? No. I saw some young Western women in short shorts and revealing tops, but not many. I haven't always wanted to conform to that here at interfaith events, I confess. But I felt over there, I was on their sacred ground and I needed to respect what made them comfortable with me. And, if a man didn't look me in the eyes or seemed to defer to my husband, I didn't let that offend me. But that didn't happen much because the people we were around are so accustomed to tourists. Did I encounter my Netru there, my gods? I felt an unexpected and close embrace by a gigantic newt, the sky goddess, as our plane touched down. It didn't seem personal. It just seemed as if I was suddenly in the land of the Netru and the most natural thing in the world. I felt surrounded by a great number of invisible beings from the time we arrived and through our whole stay. No one deity really jumped out at me. When we visited the chapel of Sekhmet at Karnak, I wept. I did not have a supernatural experience. But all of that said, I had already pretty much given myself permission not to have some dramatic religious encounter or epiphany. It was very hard work. It was very hard work. So just to keep up with the trip and the walking and everywhere we had to go and everything that our guides were telling us, because they're both professors and they were really teaching us, that consumed me. And I knew that I would spend who knows how long, years probably, processing what we experienced. So I wasn't worried about that. Honestly, the trip itself was physically grueling for us. We were exhausted most of the time, even though we were not part of a group and we were in fairly good condition. I often reminded myself that for a pilgrimage, the journey is the destination. I also realized that in some ways, if I could only visit once in my life, in a way, I was glad I couldn't visit until now. Both ancient and modern Egypt are so saturated in symbols and meaning that I could not have had the same rich experience before many years of studying ancient Egypt, pondering and practicing my own form of Kemeticism, and being deeply immersed as both an observer and a leader in the world of interfaith for more than a decade. Part of my Egyptian studies has been almost 10 years of learning to read hieroglyphs. Mamdouh in particular was wonderful. He treated me like one of his students. He would say, "Okay, Holly, come over here." He'd say, "This is a test." And he'd point to something on the wall and say, "No, read that to me." "Okay, but you know what this is. And remember, this is what this means." That was really nice. there's a famous motif that I refer to as the sima. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Horus and Set pulling against each other at the same time that the cords in their hands are pulling them closer together. And that was the image of the two lands being drawn together under one ruler. For those of you who might have seen the story a couple of nights ago in The Wild Hunt, that's the image they put at the top of the picture. So, like a needle, pulling thread through the fabric, that's what I felt when we landed back in New York. So I suddenly felt like my own two lands, were threaded and pulled together as we landed back there. And I know that even with half a planet between us physically, I'm now united with my other home, and it's present with me here the rest of my life. And that's my presentation. So I wonder if you have questions, and Margaret, maybe you can help me with this since I haven't been watching the chat box. Margaret, you have your hand up.
Oh, I have many questions, Holly, and comments, and I'm so excited to hear. I was in Egypt in 1981 and saw a lot of the things that you have seen, but to have you talk about them this many years later is just really wonderful to me, and to see the pictures and the differences as well as the similarities. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is when you were in the Great Pyramid and going up inside it, were you walking all the way, or did you have to at one point go through a very small opening on your back?
No.
And actually pull yourself through?
Wow. No, I don't think that could have been harder than what we did, but no, I don't remember that. Was that to go up? We only went up to the King's Chamber.
Okay, and it's been long enough ago that my brain doesn't remember all of the details, but that was the way we got into the center of the pyramid in 1981. So if they have changed that, I'm greatly appreciative on behalf of all the people who are now able to walk all the way up.
Well, if you could call it walking.
Yeah, as far as a walk, it was a climb, but not having to climb it on our back. But it was very, very, very small. It was low. It was narrow. And then there was probably about less than 10 feet at the very top that I was having to duck walk through that tunnel. But no, didn't have to get on our back and claw myself against the ceiling to get through it.
Thank you, Margaret. Hey, did you meet Seti, Dorothy Eady? I believe she was still alive then.
I'm sorry?
Did you meet Seti? Did you go to the Temple of Seti?
Yes.
You did? Neat.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that later. I'd like to.
Yes.
Any other questions? Somebody else?
I'm looking, I don't see any hands raised. But if you have something pop up, feel free to unmute yourself.
I see that Margaret has posted in there about some very enjoyable, cozy but smart mysteries by an Egyptologist who just died a few years ago. She wrote as Elizabeth Peters, and they're the Amelia Peabody mysteries. So yeah, she's supposedly married to an archaeologist like Petrie or Flynn, somebody like that, and yeah, they're fun.
Holly?
Yes.
It's Sabrina.
Hi,
Hi.
Sabrina. Hi there.
I'm enjoying your presentation. It's just been fabulous. I love all your photos and your stories. I was wondering, what is the name of the tour company that you guys went through? Because
I
I know
am
several people
very
that are
happy to
talking
share.
about wanting to go.
I
Yeah.
really would like to share that because these guys were great. And I will say Don Frew has used them many times. Matt Wheelton used them. And I'm typing the name. You are so right, Anna or Don, whichever of you typed. I slipped. I said Mujahideen. I meant Muezzin. Yeah, the calls to prayer. Thank you. But museumtours.com is a small family company. They've been doing it for a while. They were wonderful. We had handlers from the time we hit the airport gate to the time we went back. They
Awesome.
reached everything. We were really happy.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's on my to-do list eventually. And I've got a few friends that want to go too. So I will definitely look them up. Thank you so much,
Great.
Holly.
Yeah.
I love you, girl.
Love you too. Thanks. And I know that some of you here have been studying Egypt and or practicing some sort of Egyptian spirituality for longer than I have. But I know that we all share this being drawn to something that it's hard to explain. But that's kind of the pagan path, isn't it? So I may misspeak on some counts or misidentify something because I'm still learning too, and I'm sure I will be the rest of my life. Sean, thank you. Thank you for being here. Ah, yes, the color is wonderful. Gosh, I tried to talk fast so that y'all would be able to ask questions or talk. Does anybody have a comment about your own experience that you'd like to share? Valerie, hey. Oh, turn your microphone on.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm curious to know if you encountered any discussion while there or previously about the mysterious high technology depicted in any of the hieroglyphs.
Oh.
Like if you look around, yeah, like how is that viewed by them? Do they just like squash that and say, no, it's not going on?
That's urban myth. And yeah, we saw that stuff. It's not a helicopter. It's not a UFO. There's a nice article that we can find somewhere. There's several articles about that. It's basically just where hieroglyphs got reworked by subsequent pharaohs to use their own name. So, and the one where it looks like some kind of ray going out from Osiris's stomach, that's not what it is. It's not.
So those were actually, they're not originals. They're altered. They've been altered at some point along the way.
Yes. Well, the UFO, supposed UFO stuff is, and yeah, we did get to see that. And the thing that they wonder if it's a light bulb, it's just mysticism. It's not a light bulb. I'm not saying they couldn't have done it. These people were smart. They did not need aliens to come show them how to build a pyramid. That's my opinion, at least.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else?
If you have a question, go ahead and just pop off of mute. I don't see any hands up. So.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Anna and Donna, if you want to stay on for a minute, I'd love to chat with you because I have something to ask. Oh, Maka, I see you have a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was trying to applaud.
Oh,
I clicked the wrong thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. All right.
One small note, if I can mention before we sign off, is Cherry Hill is sponsoring our next Coming to the Center. Our host is Ronald Hutton. He will be here virtually, of course, Saturday, January 28th at 3 o'clock. That's Eastern time. And you can register right on our website, and that is also free and open.
Oh, and I'm also teaching a 4-week insights class in February, Saturdays in February, called Paronc 1. And if you go to cherryhillseminary.org, you'll see a way to sign up for either one of those.
It's right there on the side under spring courses.
Holly, if you've taken it once or twice, can you take it again? This is Candace Camp.
I don't know if I can let you in, Candace.
Oh, I'll take you to lunch next time you're in Las Vegas, I promise.
Okay, I'll take you up on that. I hope to see you there
Okay.
in the class, I mean.
Right.
Hey, Jim.
Thank you so much, Holly and Clyde, for sharing your experience. The photos were fabulous.
Thank you. It's great to see you too, Audrey. It was a good week in South Carolina, by the way.
Yes,
That's another
I saw that.
conversation. Yeah.
I shared the info, yes, here in North
I
Carolina.
thought about you. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Margot, is there anything else you want to say before we close?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you. Hi, Jenny.
You.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, dear.
I'm going to stop the recording now. Is that okay?
Yes.